After Phase 4 of the MCU started with a whimper, middled with a bang, and ended with a whimper and pain, Marvel decided to kick off Phase 5 the way Phase 2 ended, with another Ant-Man movie, starring a couple of villains they poached from other heroes, including Kang and MODOK. If you've only been keeping up with the movies and are worried about not knowing what Kang's been up to since Loki, don't worry about it. The movie mostly forgot about the show, and so should we. The film begins with Kang showing up in the quantum realm sometime between the prologue of Ant-Man and the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp. We immediately cut to Scott reading out a passage from his autobiography at a book reading, over a montage of him being high on life. Alright, that's cool, but Scott mentions how Hope's been working on all kinds of social projects, including affordable housing.
Now she's using the PIM particle for global change. Reforestation, affordable housing, food production. She's not wasting a second.
Keep that in mind. It's gonna be important later. Scott gets a call from jail, and it turns out Cassie got herself arrested. For a second time. The first time we don't see, but the second time she's arrested for, as she relays to us via clunky exposition,
I mean, it was kind of hard to see through all that tear gas you fired into the park full of peaceful protesters.
Although later on, she says
they were clearing out a homeless camp in the middle of the night. It's not their fault that they lost their homes in the blitz.
So I guess Hope's not as committed to that affordable housing thing as she seemed. One of the cops chastises Cassie for something, and she hands him a toy police car. I mean, shrunken police car. Great work maintaining consistent rules for the Pimtech guys, although that's been a problem since the first movie. Scott rightfully chastises Cassie for misusing the Pimtech. The other members of the Lang, Pym, Van Dyne extended family, let's call them the Ant family, bitch at Scott about it, and we find out that Cassie's been tinkering with the Pimtech behind Scott's back. Okay. If you wanted to use the Pimtech to help the homeless and perform other greater goods in the world, why didn't you pull a downsizing and start some kind of shrink shelter, or maybe use it to make food bigger? I was under the impression that the world had gotten over the blip by this point, but since the MCU can't seem to decide what point in time almost anything takes place in, there's no telling how long this is supposed to be taking place after Endgame. It has to be at least a year, if not two, based on how long it takes to get a book deal off the ground, at least in the real world, but the longer after Endgame this takes place, the worse this gets, especially since the MCU should have already been well on its way to post-scarcity at the end of Phase 1, between Tony's handheld infinite energy sources and incredible manufacturing innovation. Keep that in mind, it's gonna be important later. Cassie reveals she's built a quantum realm signal, and for some reason Janet freaks out about them accessing the quantum realm, even though she had no problem helping Hank, Hope, and Scott access the quantum realm at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp. It was kind of a massive plot point leading into Endgame. Did you really expect us to forget about it? Even though Janet destroyed the quantum beacon, the Ant family gets sucked down into the quantum realm, along with a bunch of ants. Keep that in mind, gonna be important later. And everyone gets split up. Scott and Cassie wind up with a group of rebels, while Hope, Hank, and Janet wind up in a city far away. Scott and Cassie drink some kind of ooze, which allows them to understand the locals for some reason. Oh yeah, there are locals in the quantum realm. Humans, humanoids, and other creatures. Why? Well, they never explain it. The quantum realm is also different to how it was portrayed in Ant-Man and the Wasp, for some reason. Scott and Cassie get captured by Kang, while Hope, Janet, and Hank meet up with original the character as portrayed by Bill Murray. He only serves to provide exposition, betray our heroes, and inform us that Janet and Hank had affairs while they were separated, which we didn't need to know. Janet tells us that Kang showed up in the QR after she did, claiming to be some sort of lost traveler, and she helped him rebuild his tech until it somehow revealed to her that he was evil, and she decided to use her tech to expand his multiversal core to an unstable size, and had been fighting back against him in the intervening time. She says he's got tech unlike anything they've ever seen before.
He's got weapons and technology centuries beyond anything we can dream of.
But he has ships that can fly in space, he can make force fields, shoot lasers, and fly, which is all stuff we've seen before. About half of that was things that Iron Man did in his first movie. She didn't tell her family about this in the time between when she was freed from the QR and when she was dusted, or between the blip and now, because of reasons. You know, if you'd told them there was a subatomic warlord trying to take over the multiverse at some point in time, maybe the Avengers could have prepared for that. Maybe Steve would have stuck around to help beat one last ass before he retired to be old for some reason. Dunno. Bill Murray disappears from the movie, Kang tells Scott to fix his multiverse engine or he'll kill Cassie, and we find out that MODOK is Darren Cross, aka Yellow Jacket from the first Ant-Man movie. Which isn't possible because we saw how Yellow Jacket shrank at the end of Ant-Man when Scott fucked up his suit. He didn't look like MODOK when he shrank. At this point, it feels like the MCU was made by picking out random names from the Marvel Wiki and attaching them to the movies. In the comics, MODOK was created by AIM as part of a mutation project, and was a recurring villain for Captain America and Iron Man. He wasn't associated with Yellow Jacket or Kang in any way. MODOK is basically worthless in this story anyways, except for one moment that's a giant ass pull later in the film. His powers aren't unique, he's basically just another Kang henchman with a giant head. Scott goes into an early 2000s temporal clone Flash game, and his other selves help him fix the multiverse thing, including a version of him that's shilling Baskin-Robbins. Again. Hope helps Scott not fall to his death, and Kang decides he's not going to keep his word. He beats their asses, takes the power core, then tries to kill everyone, but Hank saves the day because his aunts, despite being sucked into the QR around the same time the rest of them did,
apparently they passed through some sort of time dilation.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
have spent a few centuries evolving a
Technocratic, Class 2 civilization. I know socialism is a charged word.
Easy there, Movie Bob. Better keep Hank away from the Mountain Dew for the foreseeable future. Cassie leads an uprising of the native population of the QR via quantum Skype. The movie and score both try their best to imitate Star Wars. MODOK has a change of heart because Cassie quoted Wheaton's Law to him and fucking dies helping Scott fight Kang. His death is fucking pathetic, and the heroes basically humor his lame dying words. What a step down from Yellow Jacket, good fucking god. This guy used to be intimidating and now he's a goddamn joke. Darren Cross talked about dealing with Hydra casually. It was a hell of a foe in Ant-Man, and he's been reduced to something less than a punchline here. Kang is still alive because Scott forgot to double tap, and because the Ant family took too long to come back through the portal to the giant world, he kicked Scott's ass long enough that the rest of the Ant family should have gone looking for him. Eventually, Hope helps Scott kill Kang by damaging the multiversal core and throwing him into it. They return to the full-sized world. Scott has an existential crisis about killing Kang, because Kang said he was the only one who could stop the other Kangs who were going to cause some kind of multiversal war. The Council of Kangs meets to mourn one of their selves, even though they exiled him to the QR for being too evil. 2012 Loki and Mobius from the Loki TV show find another Kang variant in the past named Victor Timely, and the movie ends. I know it's only a couple of lines, but the politics are heavy-handed as fuck in this movie, and they don't even match up to the universe this movie is allegedly connected to. There's commentary about inflation during Scott's existential crisis at the end of the film, but considering the MCU should be approaching post-scarcity as I already mentioned, and they never experienced that unspecified virus of unknown origin like we did in the real world, as far as I know anyways, the joke about a cup of coffee costing $12 doesn't work in universe. As one of the few MCU properties to retain one director for more than 2 feature films, one might wonder how Ant-Man 3, Ant-Man and the Wasp 2, Quantum Enmanglement manages to have so many inconsistencies with previous movies. And that would come down to the fact that the writing staff changed dramatically from the first film, with this third entry retaining none of the writers from the first or second movies. The film obviously wants to bank on some level of connection to the Loki TV show, and if they'd actually planned things out ahead of time, they might have been able to capitalize on the fact that Jonathan Majors' Kang made his first appearance in that show, especially if the first season hadn't ended with He Who Remains taking a dagger to the ribs. If they'd taken the opportunity to plan ahead, season 1 of Loki could have ended with the Lokis tossing He Who Remains into the quantum realm, creating a direct connection between the properties without having to resort to multiversal variants. The Ant family could have found him while poking around in the quantum realm, as they were wont to do at the end of the last film, and let him loose by accident into the real world without knowing who he was until he did something nefarious to rebuild his equipment and try to take over Earth or something. Anything but spend the whole movie in this submicroscopic CGI land full of nonsensical life forms. As it stands, the plot goes basically nowhere for the first hour, and is packed full of characters and circumstances that don't matter. The movie takes place in a very limited series of real-life locations that I'm almost certain could have been shot in a weekend for most of the scenes, and the bulk of the movie is clearly shot on the same green screen digital sets Disney's been using for every goddamn thing these days. This movie cost around $200 million, and I almost don't want to know how much of that went to getting Bill Murray to show up in the movie for about 5 minutes, or how much of it went to the pointless CGI characters who added nothing to the plot, or minor characters like the one played by Danny Rebus from The Electric Company, or to changing things in post-production with CGI like they always seem to. Ultimately, this film is a gigantic waste of time and money for everybody involved, and while it's not the worst film to release after Endgame, it's definitely better than Thor: Love and Thunder, because the film doesn't shit on Scott the way Love and Blunder did on Thor. It's still a sea of hot garbage and missed opportunities. It doesn't fit into continuity, it's retcon city, and overall, it's just bad. 1.5 stars out of 10.